This is Brenda Mergus. She's a doctor living in a pre-industrial village on another planet around 1,000 years after the arrival of humans. In her lifetime, her community will be threatened by the arrival of a new wave of settlers, invaders with staggeringly superior technology, who will claim that hers is a rogue colony with no legal rights, and that the land now occupied by herself and her people has long since been bought and paid for by administrators from Earth. On a distant world, a conscientious doctor tries to prevent a war between rival human colonies. So what is high concept? Well, Wiki defines it as a type of artistic work that can be easily pitched with a succinctly stated premise. Examples in film include Psycho, Duel, Jaws, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, E.T., Ghostbusters, Alien, The Terminator, Speed, Toy Story, The Truman Show, The Matrix. You'll notice how many Spielberg films there are in there. It's said that the term high concept originated in the 80s and was used by executives to describe the films of Steven Spielberg. But what makes the films of Spielberg's heyday high concept is not just that they could be pitched clearly and quickly, but also that they got people excited about the idea. So how do you get people excited? Well, let's look at a quintessential Spielberg example, E.T. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of E.T., and if you want me to ruin your dinner party with all the reasons why, then my rates are very competitive. But there's no denying that it is quintessential Spielberg, and it is definitively high concept. So how might E.T. have been pitched? Well, on a generic level, the idea reads, alien comes to Earth. Well, we've seen that before, thousands of times. How about a benign alien comes to Earth? Well, we've seen that before too, from Spielberg himself, although he was not the first. Okay, so a spaceship full of benign aliens comes to Earth to collect botanical samples under cover of night. But they are intercepted by government spooks, and the ship takes off, leaving one of the aliens behind, alone and vulnerable.
Okay, so now we care a little bit more, but this summer I'm looking for something a little more, terms of endearment.
Okay, well, there is a relationship at the heart of this movie between E.T., who is hiding in the suburbs, and a 10-year-old boy who learns to communicate with him. At which point the receiver of the idea might be starting to lose interest. It's all getting a little bit busy. So you go back to the drawing board. If the relationship is at the heart of this screenplay, then what makes that relationship so special? Well, the boy is of an age where he has an opening for an imaginary friend, let's say. He's also trying to navigate the new difficulties of growing up in a single-parent household. He is situated between an older brother who teases him and a younger sister who annoys him, and right now he needs a special kind of pal. E.T. needs help. He's essentially a child himself, ready to take Elliot at face value and in good faith. He also offers wisdom, and his plight offers the boy precisely the kind of character-building focus that he needs in order to transcend his circumstances. So the pitch now reads, stranded alien meets boy from a broken home. So now you're feeling something. Now you're thinking. You might even feel very sentimental indeed, and if that's the case, don't be ashamed. You're supposed to. Now the pitch has an emotional angle. So you can apply this to your own ideas by bearing this in mind, that it's much less about explaining the plot or summarizing the story, and instead more about what you want to say with it. It's a description of how you want the viewer or the reader to feel. Think of the kind of copy that you have in classic movie taglines. In space, no one can hear you scream. You'll believe a man can fly. Be afraid. Be very afraid. What makes these taglines persuasive is that they are literally telling you what to feel, without necessarily including any information about the plot. These are not high-concept pictures by themselves, but it will be a useful experiment to try and distill your story idea into phrases like these. And it will help you to understand your own passion for the idea, which is always a good starting point.
In a world.
So you don't have to focus on pitching stories. If it's a fantasy world or sci-fi setting that you're trying to export, then you can use similar steps to those outlined in the E.T. example to break down your concept into a snappier and more presentable form. It'll come down to isolating one key feature, usually a cultural feature, of the world it is that you're building. In a world where books are banned, where freedom is a thing of the past, where apes rule over humans. Or maybe you could also incorporate some key environmental features. Class struggle on a world of ice. Political intrigue on a savage desert planet. Dungeons and Dragons, like literal Dungeons and Dragons. If what is happening is not on Earth in the present day, then you need to explain to people where they are. And just as with pitching stories, remember that originality is not as important as expression. Nothing is truly new. Every story has a precedent. But what makes your thing special is that it comes from your perspective. Your pitch tells a story about what it is that you want to see. It tells a story about your values. So have an interest in your own character. Figure out what truly interests you. Everything else will follow from there. I like the idea of humans colonizing other planets. But that's not nearly enough by itself. What about if we give it a political dimension? Throw some class conflict in there. I was thinking about the early Australian colonies and the practice of sending criminals and the destitute, and wondering if this colony ship could have a similar setup. People opt to be part of a multi-generational slave crew as an alternative to prison or execution, implying an overcrowded, dystopian sort of future for the Earth. So then you have Botany Bay in space, with no Star Trek reference intended, which is kind of interesting, but what about if something dramatic happens along the journey? What if, after centuries on board the colony ship, there was a mutiny? What if the ship crashes as a result, and only a small number of survivors end up on land? What would these people be like? Already by this time their own history would be more myth than fact. They've never seen a planet. They don't even know what a planet is. Maybe they think they've landed on a bigger spaceship. Perhaps they think that this new world is a hollow sphere with people living inside it. It would be a struggle to adapt. It's a bottleneck, a challenge to the survival of this newly introduced species. For the first generations, it would be a struggle just to persist and to reproduce. History would take a back seat. Eventually, culture would manifest, probably in the form of religion, and society would begin to develop its own origin story. People from Earth who don't know that they are from Earth. This is the planet Esther, and her stories are about the endurance of humanity, the romance of borders, and of places and people that are on the cusp of great change. We need characters, though. We need an emotional hook. Well, those things will be unveiled later. Big, expensive franchises are artistically impoverished right now, and we need to get new things out there into the world. Even if they start at the fringes and take a long time to make their way into the center. But they have the best chance if you think about how it is you're going to give birth to your idea. How it is that you're first going to introduce it to conversation. Now, what I've covered here is only one aspect of that process. It's really worth looking into and spending some time over. But it will help you to articulate and to infect people's imagination, which is ultimately what you want to do. To get it from here to out there. Which, if you're someone like me who has a backlog of stuff, is really a useful thing to do, because sometimes you can't move on until it's been pushed out, you know, especially if it's ready to go. You need to put it out there, because otherwise you get constipated.